In this video, I will tell you about Nephthys, a powerful Egyptian goddess. I hope you like my video. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on notifications and comment on my videos to support the growth of my channel. Nephthys or Nebet-Het in ancient Egyptian was a goddess in ancient Egyptian religion. A member of the great Ennead of Heliopolis in Egyptian mythology, she was a daughter of Nut and Geb. Nephthys was typically paired with her sister Isis in funerary rites because of their role as protectors of the mummy and the god Osiris, and as the sister wife of Set. She was associated with mourning, the night, darkness, service, childbirth, the dead, protection, magic, health, embalming, and beer. Etymology: Nephthys is the Greek form of an epithet. The origin of the goddess Nephthys is unclear, but the literal translation of her name is usually given as Lady of the House or Lady of the Temple. This title, which may be more of an epithet describing her function than a given name, probably indicates the association of Nephthys with one particular temple or some specific aspect of the Egyptian temple ritual. Along with her sister Isis, Nephthys represented the temple pylon or trapezoidal tower gateway entrance to the temple, which also displayed the flagstaff. This entrance-way symbolized the horizon or Akhet. Function at the time of the 5th dynasty pyramid texts, Nephthys appears as a goddess of the Heliopolitan Ennead. She is the sister of Isis and companion of the warlike deity, Set. As sister of Isis and especially Osiris, Nephthys is a protective goddess who symbolizes the death experience, just as Isis represented the birth experience. Nephthys was known in some ancient Egyptian temple theologies and cosmologies as the helpful goddess, or the excellent goddess. These late ancient Egyptian temple texts describe a goddess who represented divine assistance and protective guardianship. Nephthys is regarded as the mother of the funerary deity Anubis in some myths. Alternatively, Anubis appears as the son of Bastet or Isis. In Nubia, Nephthys was said to be the wife of Anubis. Though usually considered the aunt of Horus, she often appears as his mother. She is also seen as a wife of Horus. As the primary, nursing mother, of the incarnate pharaonic god, Horus, Nephthys also was considered to be the nurse of the reigning pharaoh himself. Though other goddesses could assume this role, Nephthys was most usually portrayed in this function. In contrast, Nephthys is sometimes featured as a rather ferocious and dangerous divinity, capable of incinerating the enemies of the pharaoh with her fiery breath. New Kingdom Ramesside pharaohs, in particular, were enamored of Mother Nephthys, as is attested in various stelae and a wealth of inscriptions at Karnak and Luxor, where Nephthys was a member of that great city's Ennead and her altars were present in the massive complex. Nephthys was typically paired with her sister Isis in funerary rites because of their role as protectors of the mummy and the god Osiris, and as the sister wife of Set. Less well understood than her sister Isis, Nephthys was no less important in Egyptian religion, as confirmed by the work of E. Orning along with the work of several noted scholars. Ascend and descend. Descend with Nephthys, sink into darkness with the night bark. Ascend and descend. Ascend with Isis, rise with the day bark. In the funerary role, Nephthys often was depicted as a kite or as a woman with falcon wings, usually outstretched as a symbol of protection. Nephthys's association with the kite or the Egyptian hawk evidently reminded the ancients of the lamentations usually offered for the dead by wailing women. In this capacity, it is easy to see how Nephthys could be associated with death and putrefaction in the pyramid texts. She was, almost without fail, depicted as crowned by the hieroglyphs signifying her name, which were a combination of signs for the sacred temple enclosure along with the sign for NB or mistress on top of the enclosure sign. Nephthys was clearly viewed as a morbid but crucial force of heavenly transition, i.e., the pharaoh becomes strong for his journey to the afterlife through the intervention of Isis and Nephthys. The same divine power could be applied later to all of the dead, who were advised to consider Nephthys a necessary companion. According to the pyramid texts, Nephthys, along with Isis, was a force before whom demons trembled in fear and whose magical spells were necessary for navigating the various levels of duat, as the region of the afterlife was termed. Mythology and position in the Pantheon. Though it commonly has been assumed that Nephthys was married to Set and they have a son Anubis, recent Egyptological research has called this into question. Levi notes that while Plutarch's De Iside et Osiride mentions the deity's marriage, there is very little specifically linking Nephthys and Set in the original early Egyptian sources. She argues that the later evidence suggests that, while Nephthys's marriage to Set was a part of Egyptian mythology, it was not a part of the myth of the murder and resurrection of Osiris. She was not paired with Set the villain, but with Set's other aspect, the benevolent figure who was the killer of Apophis. This was the aspect of Set worshipped in the Western oases during the Roman period, where he is depicted with Nephthys as co-ruler. It is Nephthys who assists Isis in gathering and mourning the dismembered portions of the body of Osiris after his murder by the envious Set. Nephthys also serves as the nursemaid and watchful guardian of the infant Horus. The pyramid texts refer to Isis as the birth mother, and to Nephthys as the nursing mother of Horus. Nephthys was attested as one of the 4 great chiefs, ruling in the Osirian cult center of Busiris in the Delta, and she appears to have occupied an honorary position at the holy city of Abydos. No cult is attested for her there, though she certainly figured as a goddess of great importance in the annual rites conducted, wherein 2 chosen females or priestesses played the roles of Isis and Nephthys and performed the elaborate lamentations of Isis and Nephthys. There, at Abydos, Nephthys joined Isis as a mourner in the shrine known as the Osirian. These festival songs of Isis and Nephthys were ritual elements of many such Osirian rites in major ancient Egyptian cult centers. As a mortuary goddess like Isis, Neith, and Circe, Nephthys was one of the protectresses of the canopic jars of Hapi. Hapi, one of the sons of Horus, guarded the embalmed lungs. Thus we find Nephthys endowed with the epithet, Nephthys of the bed of life, in direct reference to her regenerative priorities on the embalming table. In the city of Memphis, Nephthys was duly honored with the title, Queen of the Embalmer's Shop, and they're associated with the jackal-headed god Anubis as patron. Nephthys was also considered a festive deity whose rites could mandate the liberal consumption of beer. In various reliefs at Edfu, Dendera, and Bebite, Nephthys is depicted receiving lavish beer offerings from the pharaoh which she would return, using her power as a beer goddess, that may have joy with no hangover. Elsewhere at Edfu, for example, Nephthys is a goddess who gives the pharaoh power to see that which is hidden by moonlight. This fits well with more general textual themes that consider Nephthys to be a goddess whose unique domain was darkness or the perilous edges of the desert. Nephthys could also appear as one of the goddesses who assists at childbirth. An ancient Egyptian myth preserved in the papyrus Westcar recounts the story of Isis, Nephthys, Meskhunnet, and Heket as traveling dancers in disguise, assisting the wife of a priest of Amun-Re as she prepares to bring forth sons who are destined for fame and fortune. Nephthys's healing skills and status as direct counterpart of Isis, steeped, as her sister in words of power, are evidenced by the abundance of faience amulets carved in her likeness and by her presence in a variety of magical papyri that sought to summon her famously altruistic qualities to the aid of mortals. New Kingdom cults. The Ramesside pharaohs were particularly devoted to Set's prerogatives and, in the 19th dynasty, a temple of Nephthys called the House of Nephthys of Ramesses Mariamun was built or refurbished in the town of Sepermeru, midway between Oxyrhynchus and Heracleopolis, on the outskirts of the Fayum and quite near to the modern site of Deshashe. Here, as Papyrus Wilbur notes in its wealth of taxation records and land assessments, The Temple of Nephthys was a specific foundation by Ramesses II, located in close proximity to the precinct of the enclosure of Set. To be certain, the House of Nephthys was one of 50 individual, land-owning temples delineated for this portion of the Middle Egyptian district in Papyrus Wilbur. The fields and other holdings belonging to Nephtys's temple were under the authority of 2 Nephthys prophets and 1 Wahb priest of the goddess. While certainly affiliated with the House of Set, the Nephthys temple at Sepermeru and its apportioned lands clearly were under administration distinct from the Set institution. The Nephthys temple was a unique establishment in its own right, an independent entity. According to Papyrus Wilbur, another, House of Nephthys of Ramesses Mariamun, seems to have existed to the north, in the town of Su, closer to the Fayum region. Another temple of Nephthys seems to have existed in the town of Punajam. The Papyrus Bologna records a complaint lodged by a prophet of the Temple of Set in that town regarding undue taxation in his regard. After making an introductory appeal to Re-Herakht, Set, and Nephthys, for the ultimate resolution of this issue by the royal vizier, the prophet laments his workload. He notes his obvious administration of the House of Set, and adds, "I am also responsible for the ship, and I am responsible likewise for the House of Nephthys, along with a heap of other temples." As Nephthys of Ramesses Mariamun, the goddess and her shrines were under the particular endorsement of Ramesses II. The foundations of the Set and Nephthys temples at Sepermeru finally were discovered and identified in the 1980s, and the Nephthys temple was a self-sustaining temple complex within the Set enclosure. There can be little doubt that a cult of Nephthys existed in the temple and great town of Herakleopolis, north of Sepermeru. A near life-sized statue of Nephthys boasts a curiously altered inscription. The basalt image originally was stationed at Medine Habu as part of the cultic celebration of the pharaonic Sed festival, but was transferred at some point to Herakleopolis and the Temple of Harashef. The cult image's inscription originally pertained to Nephthys, foremost of the Sed in the Booth of Annals, but was re-inscribed or rededicated to Nephthys, foremost of the Herakleopolis. A prophet of Nephthys is indeed attested for the town of Herakleopolis in the 30th dynasty. Chief goddess of Nome 7 Nephthys was considered the unique protectress of the Bennu bird. This role may have stemmed from an early association in her native Heliopolis, which was renowned for its House of the Bennu temple. In this role, Nephthys was given the name Nephthys Kareskut, and a wealth of temple texts from Edfu, Dendera, Philae, Kam Ambo, El Kala, Esna, and others corroborate the late identification of Nephthys as the supreme goddess of Upper Egyptian Nome 7, where another shrine existed in honor of the Bennu. Nephthys also was the goddess of the Mansion of the Sistrum, in Hwt Sekhem, the chief city of Nome 7. There, Nephthys was the primary protectress of the resident Osirian relic, of the Bennu bird, and of the local Horus, Osiris manifestation, the god Neferhotep. Nephthys was most widely and usually worshipped in ancient Egypt as part of a consortium of temple deities. Therefore, it should not be surprising that her cult images could likely be found as part of the divine entourage in temples at Karga, Kelis, Deir el-Hagar, Koptos, Dendera, Philae, Sebenitos, Busiris, Shenhur, El-Kala, Letopolis, Heliopolis, Abydos, Thebes, Dakhli Oasis, and indeed throughout Egypt. In most cases, Nephthys found her typical place as part of a triad alongside Osiris and Isis, Isis and Horus, Isis and Min, or as part of a quartet of deities. Don't forget to turn on notifications, subscribe and comment to support the growth of my channel.